Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist and today doing a Timelord deck profile. So I'm really excited to do this for you guys because this deck is an extremely fun deck to play that I've included all sorts of spicy tech cards in this build for you guys. This deck can even summon out Supreme King Zark, which is absolutely insane. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards. Like getting your name description in a single video, getting assigned cards in the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month to our Patreon. So without further ado, let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Sandion the Timelord. This is one of the best cards in the entire deck, and it comes out at 4,000 attack points and 4,000 defense points. This card has a crazy powerful effect that it cannot be special summoned from the deck, and you can only control one of this card, and if only your opponent controls a monster, you can normal summon this card without tributing, and it cannot be destroyed by battle or by card effects, and neither player takes battle damage from attacks involving this card. But at the end of the battle phase, if this card battled, you inflict 2,000 points of damage to your opponent, and once per turn, during your standby phase, shuffle this card back into the deck. This card is absolutely crazy as a 3 in the deck, and just doing that 2,000 points of burn damage is really big for this deck. We then play 3 copies of Yugioh the Timelord. This is actually my favorite of all of the Time Lords in the game, but this card is great because all of your Time Lord monsters from Yugioh down actually share common abilities that they cannot be special summoned from the deck, and if you control no monsters, you can normal summon this card without tributing, and it cannot be destroyed by battle or by card effects, and you take no battle damage from attacks involving this card. And then they also all share the ability that once per turn, during your standby phase, shuffle this card into the deck, which is super cool about all of your Time Lords sharing that ability. But they also have all unique abilities that at the end of the battle phase, if they battle, they get a unique ability, like your copy of Yugioh halves your opponent's life points. That is absolutely crazy. This card can half your opponent's life points if it battles any monster, which is just absolutely crazy. I love that about this card, and it's just super good in this deck as a 3-up, that if it does battle, it just halves your opponent's life points. We then play 2 copies of Yugioh the Timelord. Yugioh also does a lot of burn damage to your opponent, which is just really cool, is if this card battles, inflict damage to your opponent equal the attack of one monster that your opponent controls that battled this card this turn, which is a crazy awesome effect to be able to use to be able to do that amount of burn damage. We then play a single copy of Zaphion. Zaphion's great as a 1 in the build, and I almost played 2 copies of Zaphion in this deck, but this card is great because if it battled, you shuffle all spells or traps that your opponent controls into the deck, which is a really good effect to be able to use on this card, to be able to just shuffle all those spells and traps back into the deck. We then play a single copy of Lazion the Timelord. Lazion's a good 1-of in this deck, but you only really need a single copy of this card, and has the ability, if this card battled, you shuffle all cards from your opponent's graveyard back into the deck, and then once per turn, if your opponent draws a card, you inflict 1,000 points of damage to your opponent, which is a pretty good effect. We then play a single copy of Medeion the Timelord. Medeion's a good 1-of in this build as well, and it has a great effect because if this card battled, you return as many monsters on the field as possible back to the hand, other than this card. And if you do, inflict 300 points of damage to your opponent for each card returned by this effect, so you can do a lot of burn damage to your opponent. We then play a single copy of Camion, and this card is actually a speed spell 4, which is absolutely crazy that neither player can respond to this card's ability. At the end of the battle phase, if this card battled, you shuffle one card your opponent controls back in the deck, and if you do, inflict 500 points of damage to your opponent. And neither player can activate cards and effects and respond to this card's activation, which is absolutely crazy that this card basically is just a speed spell 4. We then play 3 copies of Time Maiden. Time Maiden is a definite 3-of in the build, and a really good card to be able to see in your hand, because if you control no monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand, and this card can be treated as 2 tributes for the tribute summon of a Time Lord monster. You can also tribute this card to be able to add a Time Lord monster with 0 attack from your deck to your hand, and you can banish this card from the graveyard to be able to special summon out a Time Lord monster with 0 attack from your deck, ignoring its summoning conditions, but you cannot special summon other monsters during the turn you activate this effect, which is not that big of a deal because you're basically just focusing on getting those Time Lord monsters on your side of the field when you commit to your copy of Time Maiden. We then play some Kaijus in the deck to be able to make sure that we have a safe target to attack into, and for cards like Raphion, we only will do a lot of damage to the opponent, so Kaijus have a lot of attack points, so we're using those to the maximum advantage. So we're going to start off with 2 copies of the Star Destroying Kaiju. This card is a great 2 in the deck to be able to use against the opponent. We then play a single copy of Gandarla. Gandarla is just really good as a one-of to play an additional name in the deck. And then finally 2 copies of Gameciel. Gameciel is also really good just in case we want to give our opponent a little kaiju, and it's really good in this deck as a 2-of. I feel like 5 is the perfect number from playtesting, and it's really good to be able to play this amount of kaijus in the deck because you're not playing any of the level 7 ones, you're only playing the 8s and 10s, so it's really good in this particular build because you don't want to give a deck like Kashtira a level 7. So I feel like the level 8s and 10s are basically the safest ones to play in the deck, and they're really good in this build. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we're going to start off with a single copy of 1-for-1. 1-for-1 is definitely a one-of in this particular build because it's actually going to help you get to your copy of Time Maiden extremely quickly in this deck, and it's a really good one of the build. You're going to sometimes, in this deck, have multiple Time Lords in your hand that you can't summon out but one of them per turn, and this card is just really good to get a Time Maiden out on your side of the field by sending one of those cards that you can't summon to the graveyard. We then play 3 copies of Celestial Transformation. Celestial Transformation is just in case you do get multiple Time Lords in your hand. This card lets you special summon a fairy monster from your hand to your side of the field, and that monster's attack is half, but half of 0 is still 0, so it doesn't really affect them, and also destroy them during the end phase, which is again not that big of a deal. So this card is really good as a 3-of in the deck. We then play 3 copies of Interrupted Kaiju Slumber. Interrupted Kaiju Slumber is great to be able to use just to destroy all monsters on the field and give your opponent a kaiju, and you get a kaiju, which is just really good. I love this card as a 3-of in the deck, and it's just really good in this particular build to board wipe your opponent. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. So for the traps, we're going to start off with 2 copies of Trap Trick. Trap Trick is really good because this card counts as additional traps of any of the traps we're playing that are normal traps in the deck. So this card is very, very good in the deck to be able to use to have additional copies of all those really powerhouse trap cards, because you can flip this card up, banish a trap card from your deck, and then set one to your side of the field that has the exact same name. So this card is really good as a 2-of in the deck. We then play 3 copies of Torrential Tribute. Torrential Tribute is also really good at board wiping the field with cards like Interrupted Kaiju Slumber. You're always going to have a way to be able to destroy your opponent's field, so this card is a definite 3-of in the build to be able to make sure your opponent is not going to be keeping a lot of board presence. We're then going to be playing 3 copies of Soul of the Supreme King. This is actually how we summon out Zark, and this card is absolutely crazy because you pay half your life points to be able to special summon out Supreme King Zark from your extract, ignoring its summoning conditions, but negate its effects. And also, it is returned back to the extract during the end phase of the next turn. And when your opponent activates a spell effect or the effect of a spell, you can banish this card from your graveyard and 1 Supreme King Zark that's face up in the monster zone to be able to special summon up to 1 each of a Pendulum Dragon, a Z Dragon, Synchro Dragon, and a Fusion Dragon from your hand, deck, extract, or graveyard, which are always going to be coming from the extract, and we can actually summon out all 4, which is absolutely crazy. I love this card in the deck. It'll get you a 4,000 attack point monster to help you clean up games, and it's really good in this deck as a 3-of. We then play 3 copies of Empty Machine. Empty Machine is really good in this deck as a 3-of, but you really need this card in the deck because it really helps out a lot because it has the ability the first time this face-up card would be destroyed by an opponent's card effect, it is not destroyed, and once per turn you can activate one of these effects to discard a level 10 monster to draw a card, or if this card is the only card in your spell and trap card zone, target 1 Time Lord monster in the graveyard, shuffle it into the deck, and then you can set an Infinite Machine directly from your hand or deck. We then play a single copy of Infinite Machine. We just play a single copy of this card because it's super easy to get to with your copy of Empty Machine, and it has a great effect that you activate this card by sending a face-up Empty Machine from your spell and trap card zone to the graveyard, and once per turn, this face-up card cannot be destroyed by opponent's card effects, and once per turn, you can activate one of these effects that during your main phase, you can special summon a Time Lord monster from your hand, which is a great effect to get multiple Time Lord monsters on your side of the field. You can also target one of your Time Lord monsters in the graveyard, shuffle it into the deck, and then you can set an Infinite Light directly from your hand or deck, which is a crazy powerful trap card, which we're also playing as a 1-of in the deck. This card basically says you win the game when you activate it, which is absolutely crazy. It has a crazy powerful effect. You activate this card by sending a face-up Infinite Machine from your spell and trap card zone to the graveyard, and this face-up card cannot be destroyed by opponent's card effects, and neither player can target Time Lord monsters you control with card effects, or return Time Lord monsters from the field to the deck. And once per turn, if you control no monsters, you can special summon up to one Time Lord monster each from your hand, deck, and graveyard with different names, ignoring their summoning conditions. This card basically gives you the ability to put 3 Time Lord monsters on the field at any given time, and usually when you put 3 Time Lord monsters on the field, with this effect, you're going to win the game, which is why I say, when you get this card on the field, you usually win the game, which is absolutely crazy. So, that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're going to start off with 2 copies of Supreme King Zark. We're playing this card as a 2-of in the build, because you're always going to be summoning this card off of Soul of Supreme King, and it's a definite 2-of in the build. You don't go into the extra deck all that often outside of Zark, but it's still really good to be able to summon this card out, because it comes out of a 4,000 monster, and you're never going to get its effects off, because they're always negated by the effect of Soul of the Supreme King. We're then playing a single copy of Brave Eyes Pendulum Dragon. This is our Pendulum Dragon we can actually summon off the effect of Soul of the Supreme King if our opponent does activate a spell card. We then play a single copy of Starving Venom Predapower Fusion Dragon. This is our Fusion Dragon we can actually summon off of Soul of the Supreme King, which is really cool. This card is just really good to be able to use because it's a 3,600 attack point monster. We then play a single copy of Crystal Clear Wing Synchro Dragon. This card is also a target for the Soul of the Supreme King. It's just a really big boss monster. It's actually a walk in the gate, which is really cool. And then we play a single copy of Arc Rebellion XZ Dragon. Arc Rebellion does not get its effects off, but it's still one of the best targets to be able to summon in this deck to be able to put onto your side of the field off of your Soul of the Supreme King. Because if your opponent does activate a spell card, you're going to get to summon out all 4 of those dragons, which is absolutely insane, the amount of field presence you're going to get and be able to OTK the opponent. I love that you can actually summon out all of these monsters to your side of the field if your opponent does activate a spell card while you still control Zark and you have Soul of the Supreme King in the grave. We then play 2 copies of our Super Dreadnought Rail Cannon Gustav Max. This card is a definite 2-of in the build. This card just does 2,000 points of burn damage to your opponent, and it's a really good card in this particular build because it can actually help you summon out cards like Juggernaut Levy. Also, you can use 2 Time Lords to make this card. We then play a single copy of number 81. Number 81 is really good as a 1-of because this card can actually make itself unaffected by card effects, which is absolutely insane. We then play a single copy of Juggernaut Levy. Juggernaut Levy is a really good in this deck because you can easily make this card on any of these cards, which is absolutely insane. It's just a crazy powerful OTK monster to be able to make in this build. We then play a single copy of the Sky Palace. Sky Palace is really good as a 1-of in this particular build because you can make this card, and it's really good to detach a material in this card, target one face of card your opponent controls, destroy that target, and if you do, inflict 1,000 points of damage to your opponent, which is just really, really good. We then play a single copy of Ravenous Tarantula. Ravenous Tarantula is just really awesome and gets absolutely massive depending on what our life points are. We then play a single copy of number 84, Pain Gainer, which we're just going to use this card to be able to step into a copy of number 77, which is another 4,000 attack point monster that we can make in this deck. This deck is just full of 4,000 attack point monsters like Sandion, Zark, and number 77, which is absolutely insane. And don't forget about your copy of Juggernaut Lebe, which is just absolutely crazy. We then play a single copy of Double A Zeus. Double A Zeus can be made on top of any of your XZ monsters that battle, but usually I make this card on top of number 77 if I'm going for a copy of Zeus. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you enjoyed. This deck is absolutely crazy, the amount of tech cards that I put in this one, and it's just super fun to be able to play a Time Lord deck, especially with all these really cool tech cards in this deck. It's really fun to be able to play, especially when you get to summon out Zark to your side of the field, and your opponent goes, wait, what? Zark? What is that? Which is just super cool to be able to put on your side of the field. So anyways, guys, that's it for this one. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of the notification squad, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.